If you want to develop a presence that people cannot easily manipulate, you must begin by removing the one weakness that gives them the most power over you, your need for their approval. The moment you become dependent on someone else's attention, praise, acceptance, or validation, you hand them a psychological lever. They can pull it whenever they want, ignore you, and you become anxious, criticize you, and you start defending yourself, reject you, and suddenly you question your own worth, praise you, and you become eager to please them again. This is how control begins, not with chains, not with commands, but with your emotional dependence on how someone else responds to you. You have to understand that being liked is not the same as being respected. When you constantly adjust yourself to make everyone comfortable, you may receive temporary approval, but you gradually lose your authority. You become predictable. People learn that if they apply enough pressure, you will compromise. If they become distant, you will chase. If they become angry, you will apologize even when you did nothing wrong. And eventually they stop seeing your kindness as strength and start seeing it as availability. The goal is not to become cold, cruel, or incapable of caring. The goal is to become internally anchored. You can appreciate people without needing them. You can love someone without surrendering your identity to them. You can listen to criticism without allowing criticism to define you. You can accept rejection without begging someone to reconsider. That is where real freedom begins. Ask yourself how often you make decisions based on what other people might think. How often do you remain silent because you are afraid of being judged? How often do you say yes when everything inside you is saying no? How often do you change your behavior because someone withdrew their attention? Every time you betray your own standards just to maintain someone's approval, you teach yourself that their opinion matters more than your own judgment. Reverse that pattern before asking, will they like this? Ask, is this right for me? Before asking, what will they think? Ask, does this decision align with the person I am becoming? Before chasing someone who is pulled away, ask, why am I pursuing someone who has already demonstrated that they do not value my presence? These questions shift the center of your life back towards you and understand something important. You do not need to announce this transformation. You do not need to tell people, I don't care what you think anymore. In fact, saying it repeatedly can reveal that you still care deeply. Real independence is demonstrated quietly. You simply stop explaining every decision. You stop defending every boundary. You stop seeking permission to live according to your principles. When someone misunderstands you, you don't panic. When someone dislikes you, you don't collapse. When someone walks away, you don't immediately run after them. You observe, you learn, you continue. This is where your aura begins to change. People sense when someone is no longer desperate to be accepted. Your posture becomes calmer, your speech becomes more deliberate, your decisions become cleaner because you are no longer trying to satisfy 10 different opinions at once. You become less reactive because there is less for people to manipulate. But independence does not mean refusing all feedback. A strong person can hear criticism. The difference is that they evaluate it instead of automatically obeying it. If someone points out a genuine weakness, you improve. If someone insults you because they cannot control you, you don't waste energy proving yourself. You develop the ability to separate useful information from emotional noise. This is especially important when people test your boundaries. Some will be accustomed to the old version of you, the version that always answered immediately, always apologized first, always accommodated, always explained, always gave another chance. When that version disappears, they may become uncomfortable. They may accuse you of changing. They may call you arrogant, selfish, distant, or difficult. Let them. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Sometimes people call your boundaries selfish because your previous lack of boundaries benefited them. Sometimes they call your confidence arrogance because they were uh, comfortable with your insecurity. Sometimes they say you have changed because you finally stopped behaving in a way that made their life easier. You do not need to convince them otherwise. Your responsibility is not to remain the same person so that everyone around you stays comfortable. Your responsibility is to become someone you can respect when you are alone with your own thoughts. The more you develop that self-respect, the less you will tolerate relationships built on manipulation, guilt, fear, or constant approval seeking. You will stop chasing people who give you crumbs of attention. You will stop competing for places where you are clearly unwanted. You will stop negotiating against yourself simply because you fear losing someone. And paradoxically, this is often when people begin to take you more seriously. Not because you threaten them, not because you became intimidating, but because they recognize that your presence is a choice, not a desperate need. That is the beginning of becoming impossible to control. You stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else. Before you can command respect, influence a room, or develop a presence that people take seriously, you must first learn to command yourself. Because the easiest person in the world to control is the person who cannot control his own emotions. If anger can make you speak without thinking, insecurity can make you chase, jealousy can make you react, and fear can make you abandon your standards, then anyone who understands your emotional triggers has a way into your decisions. They do not need to overpower you. They only need to press the right button. That is why emotional control is not weakness. It is discipline. Think about how much power you lose when someone can instantly change your mood. One insult ruins your entire day. One unanswered message makes you anxious. One criticism sends you into an explanation. One person's success makes you question your own worth. One moment of rejection makes you desperate to prove yourself. You may believe you are reacting naturally, but every uncontrolled reaction is information. It tells people exactly what affects you, what frightens you, and what you are unwilling to tolerate. The person with real presence learns to create a space between what happens and how they respond. Someone provokes you, and instead of immediately answering, you pause. Someone disrespects you, and instead of exploding, you observe. Someone challenges your competence, and instead of desperately defending yourself, you decide whether their words contain anything worth learning. This pause may last only a few seconds, but those seconds can separate self-command from emotional slavery. You must stop confusing emotional intensity with strength. A loud voice is not power. Anger is not authority. Aggression is not confidence. Anyone can lose control. Real strength appears when you have every reason to react and still possess enough discipline to choose your response. Imagine two people being insulted in front of others. One immediately becomes defensive, raises his voice, insults the person back, and spends the next 10 minutes trying to prove that he cannot be disrespected. The other remains composed. He looks at the person, considers what happened, and responds only if a response is necessary. Which person appears more difficult to manipulate? Which one seems more secure in himself? The answer is obvious. Your objective is not to suppress emotions until you become empty. Emotions are information. Anger can tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear can tell you that something requires attention. Disappointment can reveal an expectation that needs to be reconsidered. But information should guide your decisions, not hijack them. You can feel anger without becoming anger. You can feel fear without obeying fear. You can feel jealousy without allowing jealousy to dictate your behavior. You can feel rejection without begging for acceptance. That distinction changes everything. It's about paying attention to your triggers. Notice the situations where you become someone you later regret being. Maybe you become argumentative when criticized. Maybe you become desperate when someone pulls away. Maybe you become arrogant when you feel insecure. Maybe you become silent when you should speak. These patterns are not your identity. They are habits, and habits can be studied and changed. When someone knows exactly how to provoke you, they possess leverage. So stop giving people access to your emotional control panel. Do not reveal every insecurity to everyone. Do not explain every fear. Do not make every feeling public. Privacy is not deception. Sometimes your greatest advantage is simply allowing yourself time to understand what you are feeling before you decide what to do about it. And never make major decisions while emotionally overwhelmed. When you are furious, wait. When you are desperate, wait. When you are deeply hurt, wait. When you feel an overwhelming need to send a message, make the accusation, quit the relationship, or prove yourself, wait. Give your nervous system time to settle. What feels urgent in the heat of emotion often looks completely different after you regain clarity. This is also why silence can become one of your greatest forms of discipline. You do not have to respond to every accusation. You do not have to correct every misunderstanding. You do not have to win every argument. Some battles become smaller the moment you refuse to feed them. People will test you. They will sometimes provoke you intentionally. They may raise their voice because they want you to raise yours. They may insult you because they want to see whether you become defensive. They may withdraw because they want you to chase them. They may criticize you because they want to see whether your confidence depends on their approval. Do not give them the reaction they are searching for. Stay calm. Think. Decide the goal is not to make people afraid of you. The goal is to become so internally stable that fear, anger, praise, rejection, and pressure no longer dictate your behavior. When you can remain composed while others are losing control, your presence naturally becomes stronger. People begin to recognize that they cannot easily push you into decisions, and that is the foundation of a formidable aura. Not the ability to control everyone around you, but the ability to remain in control of yourself when everything around you is trying to pull you off center. Master yourself first, and no one else gets to hold the strings. Most people reveal their power by talking too much. They explain every decision, defend every opinion, announce every plan, and rush to fill every moment of silence. They believe that if they keep talking, people will understand them, respect them, or take them seriously. But often the opposite happens. The more you explain yourself, the more information you give away. The more you rush to answer, the more people learn about your emotional state. The more desperate you become to be understood, the easier you become to read. There is another way to move through the world. Speak less, observe more. This does not mean becoming silent, withdrawn, or socially awkward. It means becoming deliberate. You stop treating every thought as something that must immediately leave your mouth. You learn to listen without preparing your next response. You watch what people do instead of becoming hypnotized by what they say. You begin noticing patterns, contradictions, hesitation, changes in tone, and the difference between someone's words and their behavior. Because people reveal themselves constantly when you are patient enough to watch. Someone can tell you they are confident, but their behavior may reveal insecurity. Someone can promise loyalty while repeatedly demonstrating inconsistency. Someone can claim they do not care while desperately seeking attention. Someone can speak about respect while disrespecting everyone around them. Words are easy, patterns are harder to fake. That is why observation becomes a form of strength. When you are constantly talking, you are busy presenting yourself. When you are listening, you are collecting information. You begin to understand what motivates people, what makes them uncomfortable, what they value, what they fear losing, and what they consistently pursue. You don't need to interrogate anyone. You simply pay attention. And there is another advantage to speaking less. You become harder to predict. If people know exactly what you think, what you feel, what you plan to do, and how you will react, they can prepare for you. But when you become comfortable with silence, you stop giving away unnecessary information. You don't announce every move before making it. You don't reveal every ambition before you've built it. You don't tell everyone what you are planning simply because you want recognition for having a plan. Let your results speak. There is tremendous power in allowing people to discover what you have done, rather than listening to you describe what you intend to do. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can announce a transformation. Anyone can say, I'm going to become successful. But the disciplined person works quietly and lets the evidence arrive later. Silence also becomes powerful when someone tries to provoke you. Imagine someone makes a disrespectful comment and waits for your reaction. They want you angry. They want you defensive. They want you to start explaining yourself. If you immediately react, you have allowed them to dictate the emotional direction of the interaction. But if you pause, look at them calmly, and decide whether the comment even deserves a response, you reclaim control. Sometimes the strongest response is a short sentence. Sometimes it is a question. Sometimes it is walking away. Sometimes it is nothing at all. Silence forces people to sit with their own words. This is especially powerful because many people become uncomfortable when they cannot immediately read your reaction. They may start explaining themselves. They may reveal more than they intended. They may become nervous and fill the silence with unnecessary information. The mistake is believing that you must rescue every uncomfortable moment. You don't, you are allowed to pause. You're allowed to think. You're allowed to say, I'll consider that. You are allowed to refuse to answer immediately. You are allowed to leave a question unanswered when answering it would give away something that does not need to be shared. But remember, silence should never become a childish attempt to punish people. The goal is not to manipulate someone through ignoring them. The goal is self-command. There is a difference between strategic restraint and emotional games. You should also learn to stop over-explaining your boundaries. If you say no, you do not need to provide a 20-minute defense of your decision. The more reasons you provide, the more opportunities you give someone to argue with those reasons. No, that doesn't work for me, can sometimes be enough. Your life does not require a courtroom defense every time someone disagrees with your choices. And as you become more observant, pay attention to what people do when they believe nobody is watching. Watch how they treat people who cannot benefit them. Watch how they respond when they are told no. Watch whether they take responsibility when they make mistakes. Watch how quickly their personality changes when they enter a room with someone more powerful. These moments reveal character far more clearly than rehearsed conversations. Your objective is not to become suspicious of everyone. It is to become perceptive enough that you don't constantly mistake words for evidence. The strongest presence in the room is often not the person talking the most. It is the person who is comfortable enough to listen, disciplined enough to pause, and observant enough to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface. When you stop needing to fill every silence, you stop giving everyone access to your mind. And when you learn to observe before you react, you stop being controlled by the moment. You begin controlling yourself within it. If you want people to take you seriously, you must understand that respect is not created by demanding it. It is created by the standards you consistently enforce. Your boundaries tell people what access they have to you, what behavior you accept, and what happens when someone crosses the line. Without boundaries, even the strongest words become meaningless because people eventually judge you by what you tolerate rather than what you claim to tolerate. You can tell someone, don't ever speak to me that way. But if they disrespect you again and you remain available exactly as before, your words have no weight. You have taught them that your boundaries are only suggestions. Real boundaries are not threats. They are decisions backed by action. This is where people fail. They believe setting boundaries means becoming aggressive, confrontational, or intimidating. It does not. A boundary can be delivered calmly. In fact, calm boundaries are often stronger because they do not depend on anger. You don't need to shout when you know what you will do. You don't need to threaten revenge. You simply make your standard clear and follow through. If someone repeatedly cancels plans and treats your time as worthless, you do not need to deliver a dramatic speech. You can simply stop making yourself constantly available. If someone repeatedly insults you, you do not have to compete with their disrespect. You can reduce your access to them. If someone constantly demands favors while offering nothing in return, you can say no. The power is in consistency. People learn your boundaries through repetition. If you tolerate disrespect one day and punish it the next, nobody knows where the line actually is, including you. But when your response is predictable, your standards become clear. This does not mean every mistake deserves permanent rejection. Human beings make mistakes. Someone may speak carelessly, recognize it, apologize sincerely, and change their behavior. That is different from someone who repeatedly violates your standards, apologizes only when confronted, and then repeats the same behavior. Learn to distinguish mistakes from patterns. A single incident can be corrected. A repeated pattern tells you something, and this is where self-respect becomes more important than winning. Sometimes the strongest boundary is not proving that someone was wrong. It is deciding that you no longer want to participate in the same cycle. You do not need the final word. You need the final decision. Stop explaining your boundaries to people who have already demonstrated that they understand them. There are people who ask questions, not because they want clarity, but because they want to negotiate your limits. They hear no and immediately ask why. You explain. They challenge the explanation. You provide another reason. They challenge that one too. Soon you are defending a decision that never required their approval in the first place. You must become comfortable saying no without writing an entire essay about it. No, I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not comfortable with that. I've decided not to continue. Sometimes that is enough. And when someone becomes angry because you established a boundary, remember that their anger does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. Some people benefit from your lack of limits. When you finally establish standards, they experience your self-respect as a loss of control. That discomfort belongs to them. You also need boundaries with yourself. This is often overlooked. You cannot expect others to respect standards that you refuse to maintain internally. If you promise yourself that you will stop chasing people who repeatedly ignore you, then keep that promise. If you decide you will no longer accept certain treatment, don't make exceptions simply because you are lonely. If you commit to protecting your time, stop giving it away every time someone asks. Self-respect becomes powerful when you keep promises to yourself and understand that boundaries are not walls around your heart. They are doors with locks. You decide who receives access, how much access they receive, and whether that access continues. You can still be compassionate. You can still forgive. You can still care deeply. But compassion without discernment can become self-abandonment. You should never have to become cruel to become difficult to mistreat. The strongest response to disrespect is often not retaliation. It is consequence. If someone treats your time carelessly, they get less access to it. If someone repeatedly breaks trust, they receive less responsibility. If someone demonstrates that they cannot handle your openness, they receive less of your private world. The consequence should fit the behavior, not your anger. This is what makes your presence different. You stop making empty threats. You stop announcing what you will do. You simply become consistent. People eventually realize that when you say something matters to you, it actually does. And once your standards become visible through your actions, you no longer need to convince people to respect you. They understand that access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Protect your standards calmly, consistently, and without apology. There is a difference between being unpredictable and being unstable. Unstable people create chaos because they cannot control themselves. Unpredictable people create uncertainty because they refuse to make themselves completely available for interpretation. If you want to develop a powerful presence, you do not need to behave irrationally or keep people constantly guessing. You simply need to stop making your thoughts, plans, emotions, and next moves so easy for everyone to predict. Predictability becomes a weakness when people know exactly how you will respond before you respond. They know what will make you angry. They know what compliment will make you seek their approval. They know how long you will tolerate disrespect. They know that if they ignore you, you will chase. They know that if they pressure you, you will eventually surrender. Once someone understands your patterns completely, influencing you becomes easy. The solution is not to become mysterious for the sake of appearing powerful. The solution is to become less dependent on predictable reactions. You don't have to announce everything you are planning. In fact, one of the simplest ways to protect your power is to stop explaining your future before you have built it. You, you need everyone to know your next goal, your next move, your financial plans, your relationship decisions, or the changes you are making in your life. There is strength in allowing your actions to arrive before your explanations. Too many people reveal their intentions because they want recognition. They tell everyone what they are going to accomplish, how successful they are going to become, what they are going to change, and how they are going to respond to someone who wronged them. Then they feel powerful for 5 minutes because they have announced the plan. But announcements are not achievements. Key preparation is often more powerful than public declaration. Work while people assume you are still thinking. Improve while nobody is watching. Build skills without constantly asking for applause. Let people underestimate you if they want to. You do not have to correct every inaccurate assumption about you. Sometimes being underestimated gives you room to move. This also applies to emotional behavior. If someone knows that every criticism will make you defensive, they can control the conversation. If they know that every withdrawal will make you chase, they can control your attention. If they know exactly how you react to jealousy, rejection, or disrespect, they can predict your behavior before you even understand what you are doing. Break the pattern by becoming more deliberate. If you normally respond immediately, give yourself time. If you normally explain everything, simplify your response. If you normally argue, ask a question instead. If you normally chase someone who pulls away, step back and observe, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a way of interrupting automatic behavior. You are teaching yourself that you choose your actions rather than simply repeating old reactions. But never confuse unpredictability with dishonesty. You do not need to lie, deceive, or deliberately confuse people. Your strength should come from privacy and flexibility, not manipulation. Keep certain things to yourself because they are yours to protect, not because you want to create unnecessary fear. There is also power in changing your environment and habits when they no longer serve you. People become comfortable with the version of you they have already figured out. They expect you to remain in the same role, make the same choices, and accept the same treatment. When you grow, they may initially resist because your transformation disrupts their expectations. Let it disrupt them. You are not required to remain predictable simply because someone became comfortable with an outdated version of you. Maybe you used to answer every message instantly. You can become someone who responds when you have time. Maybe you used to explain your choices to everyone. You can become more private. Maybe you used to say yes automatically. You can learn to pause before agreeing. Maybe you used to reveal every emotional reaction. You can learn to process privately before responding. These changes create a different kind of presence because people realize they cannot automatically access you. But remember that your unpredictability should always be anchored by consistency in your principles. Your methods can change, your plans can change, your responses can change depending on circumstances. but your core standards should remain stable. Be unpredictable in strategy, not in integrity. Be flexible in approach, not in character. This distinction is crucial. If people never know whether you will keep your word, you do not appear powerful. You appear unreliable. If people cannot trust your commitments, your aura weakens. True strength means people know you have principles, even if they cannot predict exactly how you will achieve your goals. And never use unpredictability as an excuse for cruelty. You do not need to hurt people simply to prove that you cannot be controlled. You do not need to disappear from someone's life without explanation just to make them wonder. You do not need to create jealousy or uncertainty for attention. Your goal is freedom, not psychological games. The strongest person is difficult to manipulate because they are not desperate to maintain a particular image. They can change direction when new information appears. They can walk away when something no longer serves them. They can remain calm when others expect an explosion. They can act when others expect hesitation and remain silent when others expect an argument. That is real unpredictability, not chaos, but choice. When people realize they cannot push the same buttons and receive the same reaction every time, their ability to control you begins to disappear. Let your principles be predictable. Let your growth be inevitable. Let your next move remain yours to decide. The final stage is not about becoming louder, colder, or more intimidating. It is about becoming so grounded in yourself that your presence communicates self-respect before you ever say a word. Real authority does not come from demanding attention. It comes from the way you carry yourself, the standards you maintain, the decisions you make, and the consistency with which you live by them. When those things become aligned, people begin to take you seriously without you having to convince them. Think about the difference between someone who desperately wants to appear powerful and on someone who genuinely knows their value. The first person constantly performs. They interrupt, boast, exaggerate, dominate conversations, and look for opportunities to prove that they are important. The second person does not need to perform. They can enter a room quietly and still command attention because there is something settled about them. They are not searching for permission to belong. They are not monitoring every action. They are comfortable occupying their own space. That is the kind of presence you should build. Start with your body. Your posture communicates before your mouth does. Stand upright. Move deliberately. Avoid nervous movements that constantly communicate uncertainty. Make natural eye contact without trying to intimidate anyone. When you speak, do not rush simply because you are afraid of silence. Give your words enough space to land. Your physical presence should communicate that you are comfortable being where you are. Then look at your speech. You do not need complicated language to sound powerful. You need clarity. Say what you mean. Avoid unnecessary apologies. Stop weakening every statement with phrases like maybe, I guess, or I'm probably wrong, but when you actually know what you are saying. Confidence is not pretending to know everything. It is being comfortable saying, I don't know, when you genuinely don't know. That distinction matters. A secure person does not need to pretend to be perfect. And when you make a mistake, own it quickly. Nothing weakens presence faster than someone desperately trying to protect an image of perfection. If you were wrong, say so. If you made a poor decision, correct it. If you hurt someone, take responsibility. Strength is not the absence of mistakes. Strength is the ability to face reality without collapsing. Your decisions also shape your presence. People pay attention to what you consistently choose. If you constantly talk about standards but repeatedly abandon them when pressure arrives, people notice. If you say you value your time but give it away to anyone who demands it, people notice. If you say you will leave situations that repeatedly disrespect you but always return, people notice. Your behavior is your real reputation. This is why the previous principles matter. When you stop chasing approval, control over you decreases. When you master your emotions, People cannot easily provoke you into losing your judgment. When you observe more and speak less, you understand situations before reacting. When you establish boundaries, people learn what access to you actually requires. When you become flexible and less predictable, manipulation becomes harder. Now, all of those qualities come together into presence, but there is an important correction to the idea of bending people to your will. The strongest form of influence is not forcing people to obey you. It is becoming someone whose judgment, competence, discipline, and character naturally carry weight. People can disagree with you and still respect you. They can say no to you and still value your opinion. That is a much stronger form of influence than fear. Fear creates temporary compliance. Respect creates lasting influence. You do not want people obeying you because they are afraid of what you might do. You want your presence to make people think carefully about how they deal with you because they recognize your standards and your self-respect. That kind of authority cannot be manufactured overnight. It has to be earned through repeated behavior. And this is where patience becomes part of your aura. Do not expect everyone to recognize your transformation immediately. Some people will continue treating you according to your old identity. They remember the version of you who tolerated everything, explained everything, reacted emotionally, and sought their approval. Your job